This is Humans of Non-League, a podcast about people who live and love football outside the spotlight. My name is Chris Nee, and this week's human is a multi-talented media professional who's been able to bring his considerable skills not only into football, but directly into a non-league football club. Seb White is the media director at Hampton Richmond Borough, and is responsible in large part for MUNDIAL, one of the leading titles football culture has to offer. Seb, welcome to the show.
Oh, that's an introduction. Thank you very much. It's always nice to hear. I have so many different hats at the moment. It's nice to hear it all laid out like that. So thanks very much for asking me. And I'm a sucker for non-league football, so I will talk about non-league football to most people. But thanks very much for asking.
Perfect. Well, those aren't all your hats, which we'll come on to, but I want to start near enough at the beginning. Where does the Seb White story start? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, I was born and bred in Somerset, deepest, darkest Somerset, in a market town called Yeovil, which also happened to have a fairly successful non-league football team, certainly successful in the FA Cup. Still the most Football League teams beaten by a non-league team is a record held by Yeovil Town Football Club. But as a result, I lived literally across the bridge from the old ground, and my school was right opposite the old ground, or what people will know as Hewish. And the sloping pitch, which some people will remember from various news reports from back in the day of Yeovil Town conquering league giants, including Sunderland in 1948 and 1949, which is arguably the greatest FA Cup shock there's ever been. But as is everything in football, that is up for debate, but I'll certainly take that. But so that's how it all started for me. My granddad took me, my dad took me, and it all went from there, really. And Yeovil Town were a non-league side, and they were considered one of the big non-league sides. We'd get crowds of 1,500 to 2,000, which fairly big in those days, on average. But for big games like QPR and the FA Cup in 1988, it was a sellout, and I think that was around 12,000, 13,000, something like that. So the town always came alive for FA Cup. But I was there week in, week out with my granddad or my dad or both, or my brother as well, and that's really where everything started for me, not just in terms of my hobby, but I'm sure I can trace everything back to what I do now, back to those days at Hewish.
Were you a keen writer or creator when you were a kid?
I think looking back on it, I used to do little things. Used to make sort of my own match day programs and things like that, and cut my shoot magazines up and my 90 minutes magazines, and then which then went into 442 and cut them up and make things. Used to try and design football kits. I mean, this was obviously all pre-computer, so it was all very much scissors and Pritt stick. I got into When Saturday Comes quite earlier on than perhaps most people do. I think maybe 12 around then. I remember John Barnes' cover and my dad used to go and watch Manchester United and would bring back sort of these mad fanzines, and probably shouldn't have been reading them when I was 12 years old. I think anyone, looking back at old United We Stands and red issues, they were a little bit advanced for a 12-year-old or younger lad. But I just sort of got in, I would just consume anything about football. And I know it makes me sound like a really old 40-year-old, which I am now, and I have to accept that reality. But things were so different. We didn't have the internet, we didn't have all that sort of thing. So the guy across the road used to give me his copy of World Soccer. I picked up the copy of Shoot magazine at the end of the road. My dad and stepdad used to buy the paper every day, and that's how you consume football. Teletext was another way of consuming the game, shall we say. It was just very different, and I think I just wanted to consume any way I could, really, and I think it sort of stuck, really, and I'm and even at that young early age, and I think I probably got it from my dad, because I read all my dad's Goal magazines or Charles Buchan Monthly, and maybe even from my granddad, and even the old programmes. They collected them and kept them all and passed them on to me, so I did the same. They're all still sat in my garage, all my old Shoot magazines and any magazines I pretty much bought then, much to the annoyance of my wife, which is, and I totally get it. But I think it's just stuck with me, and I think that has sort of led me down a various paths that I've gone onto. But I suppose the one that really, apart from writing the odd letter to 90 Minutes or Shoot magazine or stuff like that, and a couple of them were printed and things, in my writing, I think, or sort of creatively, that the first real sort of germination of all that consuming football magazines and consuming football how I'd done was probably when I started the Yeovil Town fanzine when was it? 2002. So I was still 21. I think mainly I did what any 18, 19, 20-year-old had done at that point, and read, and just enjoyed the adult life, enjoyed alcohol, enjoyed going to games and stuff like that. So creatively it didn't quite hit. But when I went to university, I felt a real attachment to Yeovil Town because I was away in Manchester, and I think it just started from there really. And I just decided to we were doing quite well at the time. Most fanzines start from hardship or anything. Certainly the ones in the early days started from a rallying call against various things that were going wrong in football at the time. But the Yeovil Town fanzine, On to Victory, which we started, very much started at a great period of the for the football club. We were, we did it for the FA Trophy final, which is obviously the non-league league cup, so to speak, and it's something that I'd always wanted Yeovil to do well in, because we weren't going to get promoted. We weren't ever that close to getting promoted into the football league. To be fair, that process had only happened, I think, 1988, 87. So it had only been a recent thing, but we'd never been close to promotion. But I'd always hoped and we'd always dreamed that Yeovil would one day play at the famous Wembley Stadium. Of course, the one time we do get to the final of the FA Trophy, Wembley Stadium's getting knocked down. So we played it at Villa Park, but it felt like there was going to be around 10 to 15,000. And we thought we'd try and capture a little bit of that and also capture the burgeoning, shall we say, internet scene, online scene that Yeovil Town did have at the time. We had a website, an amazingly well-named, should I say, website called Cyberspace rather than Cyberspace, which obviously just was quite big, I think, not just in Yeovil Town circles, but quite big in non-league circles. And so we were able to tap into that really and say, we're going to do a fanzine for the game. We turned up to Villa Park, a few cans on the way with a bag of 500 fanzines, and they were all gone by 2:10. So we were able to go in the ground and then watch us win the FA Trophy. And the following season, we actually won the league in the conference, which was incredible. And Yeovil Town became a football league club. And little did I know at that time, that's when things might have changed. Longer term, I wasn't to know it then, but things were going to change from that point. But yeah, that's where my creative side of things happened. And off the back of that, I started writing for various fanzines. I think there was a great Wigan one called Cockney Latic, which is now the Mudhutter Football Express. I did a couple of articles for United We Stand. I got to know a few people through working at sports pages in Manchester when I was at university. So I started to write a lot more. And then, the rest, as they say, is history.
I'm going to pull together three of the things you've mentioned there. The first one being the fanzine, the second being the internet and football fan culture, and the third one being Villa Park. And a lot of what I learned about being a football supporter in the 1990s and actually being around football culture in general came from being a 10, 11, 12-year-old reader of Heroes and Villains at the Villa. So I think it's really interesting that the way football discussion has changed in the last 10 years, since a fanzine has started to die out as a guaranteed paper copy at a game phenomenon, has been a lot quicker than it changed in the 10 or 15 years before that. So do you think the generation after ours is missing out on some part of being a football supporter because they don't have that experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, personally. Yeah, I think so. I think... like I said, I got into When Saturday Comes early, and that was obviously a national fanzine. It was very much the fanzine spirit, the fanzine writing, and still is, to this day, which is fantastic. But yeah, I believe so, because I think one of the things that I learned by putting together our own fanzine was that it's all well and good. Everyone, and this was the days when we did it, obviously, of forums and social media wasn't a thing as such, I suppose, or unless you can count website forums and things like that as an early form of social media, because it was very social, the element around it, however you want to describe it. But the one thing that you can say about all those things and around that time is that it was just, you could just write something and bash it out, couldn't you, on a forum, and then it would be there, and then it would probably disappear, and it would just keep going down the thread. And hopefully, if you'd said something stupid or maybe gone on there after a few too many pints, or if you've maybe perhaps got the wrong end of the stick, you probably wish that it had gone down a bit further. But I think that was the thing with forums and stuff. So you had that, and then but when you took that into a fanzine environment and meant You had to you couldn't just post it and then not worry too much about the spelling and worry too much about the point you were making. When you change that around, and you have to think about that, and when you send it to someone, and then it takes them you have it in your mind that it needs to be relevant in 3-4 weeks' time when that fanzine is going to be in someone's hand on a cold, windswept ground. So it did change. It made me realise just how important that sort of side of it is. And I think now, if you are to compare those two times, it's very easy for me or for anyone to just either write something very quickly and it just goes out, and because obviously it's a shorter form on social media. But at the same time, the British Library have copies of fanzines for a reason, because sooner or later someone will want to know about a specific incident or a specific time around the club, and they'll look at a fanzine from the time. I don't know if it will be as easy accessible in years to come to do that. What did Arsenal fans really think? Well, what did Arsenal fans really think in December 2020? I'll tell you what they would. They would just go to the Gooner fanzine, which is still going. They'll look at that rather than some half-baked video that just is intended to get a few clicks and stuff like that. So that's a long way around of me saying that I think people do miss out. But one thing I would just want to quickly say on that, you've seen the rise of a few fanzines in this digital age, and because of that. So I think the best example of that for me, just from the outside looking in, was West Ham Bogs, the Barnsley fanzine. There's absolutely no reason why I should know too much about Barnsley Football Club or how that works, or the people involved in Barnsley Football Club. But just through the internet and online, I found out about West Ham Bogs through internet and online, the people. And I've got good friends off the back of it, and I still talk to them and still. So I think that goes to show the power of a fanzine, even in this digital age and in this online age. And, obviously the fanzines in this day and age, they might not be able to sell at games and things like that as much, or certainly not in the current climate, but at least they have the option to sell and promote their fanzine online. And I've read, Gosport Borough fanzine, one of the guys from Privet Life, I think it is, again, just someone who sent me a fanzine and wanted me to do an article, and I did it because I thought, fair play to you for doing it in this day and age.
We'll come back to your professional life shortly, and when we do, we'll be overlapping with Hampton and Richmond Borough. So, firstly, how have they been doing these last few years? Probably this year in particular is most interesting.
Yeah, this year's been tough, like it has been for every non-league club. But I think the community aspect of it, if you, not saying all non-league football clubs have it, but they certainly have the option and the potential to have it. It's how that's harnessed and managed. Volunteers have to feel part of it. Volunteers have to feel that those hours that they're spending sweeping the terraces or putting up something, or what non-league football is all about, making the best of what you have, and sometimes that's not very much, and you need volunteers to do that. So I think volunteers at non-league level have to be treated with respect and have to be included in everything, and that's one of the reasons I find myself at Hampton and Richmond Borough. And I think if you've got that sort of strong base, then I think no matter what is thrown at you, as this year has shown, no one knows what that can be until it actually happens. Then you can be okay. And I think that translates as well. I think everything off the pitch, what happens off the pitch is such a big influence on what happens on it. Even more so, I would argue, in non-league football, because those people that you that feel part of the club will then keep coming back to that club, and every single penny, as we know, that goes through the turnstile, so to speak, is absolutely vital. Now, in this time and this recent months, they've not been able to do that, but there are other ways for doing that, and there are other ways that people can be connected to a football club. But I think luckily it's come together quite well, despite the circumstances for Hampton and Richmond Borough. And just before we went into isolation for 2 weeks after a positive COVID test, we'd won 6 out of 8, and we were in the playoffs, and we're looking good, and that's largely a result of a fantastic manager, but also a group of players that decided to stick with Hampton and Richmond Borough in the summer post lockdown 1, and sign back on with us, which again isn't always possible in non-league circles because it's expensive, and to get players on contracts and stuff like that. Again, some people, when I tell them that how different football is at this level, it sometimes can be a bit of a shock at them. They expect that these players are getting paid, and a lot of these players, some of these players aren't even on contract. They're getting paid for when they play, of course, but they're not actually on a contract as such as what people would know higher up. So luckily, not luckily, I think, because sometimes you make your own luck, and I certainly think Gary McCann has made his own luck. He's one of the finest managers at this level, and we're extremely lucky to have him. And anytime someone in our league or the league above loses a manager, I'm always fearful of that call, because I think he's shown what he can do with limited budget. But luckily we're doing well, and everything was coming together before we got stopped temporarily by COVID.
How did you first come to be involved there?
One of my good friends, Matt, moved to Hampton. I live in Richmond. It's probably, it takes me about 45 minutes, 50 minutes to walk it from where I live. So it wasn't exactly like round the corner, I'm just going to go and watch some football. My friend Matt had moved to Hampton a little bit closer and just said, do you fancy going along? And purely just tick it off the list. That was honestly, I had no other intentions. I'd become disaffected with Yeovil Town for a huge number of reasons, which I've mentioned a number of times on various podcasts, which I get bored of myself of saying it. But just to go and watch some football and tick a ground off a list. I did that. Hampton Richmond Borough lost 4-0 to Lewis in front of 450 people on a Tuesday night. The floodlights were on. It looked a great traditional stadium, non-league traditional, should I say, stadium. And there was a tussle. Let's just say the players had a post-match tussle in the changing room, which then spilled out into the car park. And I jokingly said to my friend Matt, "Oh, this is quite, obviously I'm not condoning violence or anything like that, but it just sort of made us laugh." And went, "Oh, same time again Saturday." And we both went, "Well, why not?" And we came back, and the rest is definitely history. And people started to recognise us, as you do at these level. And there might only be 450 people, but you see the same people. You see this, they see you. You get talking. It just so happened that was the start of a bit of a resurgence on the pitch for Hampton Richmond Borough, and they actually made, from that point, they ended up going to win the league. So obviously that helped a little bit, just to sort of ingrain us and enjoy. And then we started going on away games and just ticking off new grounds, meeting new people, and it made me. I can't lie, it made me fall back in love with football from a spectator point of view, and I'd fallen back in love with football for various other things, MUNDIAL and the like. But it really made me just enjoy it and enjoy that match day experience. And then I joined the Supporters Trust, because I've been a fervent supporter of fan ownership at all football clubs, and again influenced by my own experiences at Yeovil Town. But I've always pushed Supporters Trust movements, whether it's on social media or even during the brief reign of the Stand fanzine that we did back in 2010, I think it was. I can't remember the dates exactly, but so I joined the Supporters Trust at Hampton Richmond Borough. It's got a great relationship with the football club, and then one thing led to another, and I increasingly fell in love with the football club and just decided that I wanted to help in any way I could from my perspective, from my professional perspective, and try and raise awareness of what is a great football club, but also just try and keep the charm and keep the amazing bits of the football club, but also progress it and help it progress and help it do the best it possibly can. And whatever that is fine. There's no long-term huge goals of being a football league team or something like that. It would be lovely to get in the conference one year. There's no doubt about it. The National League, sorry, as it's now known, from the National League South. It'd be lovely to do that, and it'd be lovely to pit our wits against full-time opposition and the like, and see what that journey would involve. But at the same time, it's not the end of the world, because whatever happens, and football. And crucially, you can't have a pint if you go into the National League. So I won't lie. Having a beer and watching football has been great, and it's been a real difference from what I had experienced over the last 10, 15 years since I set up, or certainly 10 years since I set up Onto Victory, the Yeovil Fanzine. You've
mentioned that you fell back in love with the spectator side of things. Did that make you think twice before getting involved?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And then I remember John, one of the guys that we met quite early on in the pub around the corner, a disaffected Blackpool fan who hadn't been to Blackpool for forever. And I just noticed his Oyster Out scarf, and I started speaking to him, and then one thing led to another, and me, Matt and John now are known certainly within the club as the Three Amigos. So let that paint the picture. But he was quite clear, as we were getting deeper and deeper into the fabric of the football club. It's very easy to do, but you still want to enjoy the match days. You still, that's why you've enjoyed it, and that's why you've enjoyed, rediscovered your love of football. Be careful; you don't want to see necessarily too much behind the curtain. So I definitely paused and thought about it, and really thought about it. And I'm not going to say this is going to be like this forever, but the chairman at the time, and the relationship the supporters trust had with the football club, it all fitted very well. And I thought, well, if I'm going to help or get involved in them, I'll get involved in them now when the people I relate to, the people, they're the same as me. They're fans that want to make the club succeed. No one's looking to do anything with the land or anything dodgy or anything that I'd obviously seen at Yeovil Town Football Club. So I was like, no, I want to offer what I can offer. And again, I went into it and said, look, I want to help this side of things because that's the way I can help you, the media side of things, and hopefully get the club and get the greatness of the club and the fabric of the club and the people of the club in front of more people, so that I'm not judging it on anything. There's no things like KPIs or anything like that. But if there's another 50 to 100 people going through the gate when we do get back to some sense of normality, then that would be good enough for me. And it's one of the key things that we've tried to do during this whole process of being locked down and not being able to go to games. We said straight away that we wanted to have a stream that would be free, so people would, we didn't want to have any barriers for entry to getting involved or to getting an affinity with Hampton Richmond Borough Football Club. I'm not expecting people to suddenly, jump on the wagon and buy the shirt and do all this but just have an interest or make people realise how good non-league football is, and that's why we decided to do the stream for free. Luckily, we were able to do that, and again, this goes back to keeping volunteers engaged, having the right volunteers. We had some technically minded volunteers, and luckily we all decided, well, let's just give this a punt. We could have gone with any number of numerous people that were going around emailing us left, right and centre, we can do this, we can do that, and promising the world. And we weren't so sure, because I think my background as a TV producer makes me realise how difficult these things are. And I didn't want people to be paying for something that wouldn't work, essentially. And I think we've seen that a lot with non-league football recently. It's a shame. I don't want people to fail, but we thought, well, why don't we test something and do it for free for a couple of games and see what happens? And the last game we had 750 people watching it from all around the world, which is just ridiculous, really, for a National League game. But that's what we want, because hopefully wherever they're watching it, they'll realise that non-league or smaller level football is great. And one thing I keep saying is that the football is actually decent. It's very different even from when I was watching non-league football in the late 80s. These players, certainly in the National League South, I can base it on that. These players are athletes, skillful footballers who dedicate so much of their time for 100 quid a week, couple 100 quid a week. And they go to training twice a week. They drive there. They have to wash their own kit and stuff like that. These people are putting so much into it, but as a result, you get decent football. Don't get me wrong. I think we've hit a sweet spot at the moment with Hampton Richmond Borough. Don't get me wrong. It's not always going to be like that, but anything we can do to try and keep it like that as much as possible is great. And one time, I'm sure in years to come, we might not have maybe the right manager or the right players, even at this level. We're not always going to have someone like Gary McCann and have this group of players that are going to make it as involved and as meaningful. But that's what you got to try and hope for. And football is cyclical as well, so you got to accept it. Sometimes it won't be like that.
If we go back 9 or 10 years or so, we get the emergence of Stan Fanzine, of which you were founder.
Me and Dan, who set up MUNDIAL as well. Yeah.
How did that original publication come about?
That one just came, again, talking about how good the internet can be how good online can be for a fanzine type of thing. That was all through people I met through the internet who seemed to be saying the same things as me a little bit. Football is, it's too expensive. How can it cost this much to go to this game? How can it cost this much to do this? And nowhere had really a group of people, a network of people I'd gathered them up, and no one had really harnessed this against modern football movement, which is prevalent across all of Europe, and certainly Eastern Europe, Italy, and places like that, which I'd seen on my travels. Luckily for my job, these people making this AMF or however you want to call it, that tag can sometimes be a bit of a hindrance in some sense, because you just get naysayers saying, well, do you want to go back to the bad days of people dying in stadiums and police, and not fans hooliganism and not wanting to go to games and stuff like that, which is obviously a nonsense. We didn't want that. We just felt that sometimes things had gone too far the other way. Safe standing, club ownership had gone too far. and things like that. So that just came about and we just decided to do it. But again, fanzine-wise, we wanted to make sure that it had that sort of rallying call from the fanzines of the late 80s and 90s that we'd read back on and looked at. But I think the one thing that became quite obvious and straight away, or fairly quickly, or certainly a few issues in, was I think it just got very tiring to be so negative all the time, shall we say, or focus on the negative things. It became a chore almost, which is a real shame, which is obviously not what we wanted it to be. We wanted it to be, let's enjoy the good things. And then off the back of that, that's how MUNDIAL came about, really. It was quite clear that we weren't going to change the world, which naively we maybe thought we might be able to when we started Stand. And why don't we just, again, maybe as we were getting a bit older as well, I didn't want to turn into this old man grumbling about the same old things all the time. And we decided, let's celebrate the positives. Let's try and remember why we love football, which is a terrible segue for me to talk about the tagline of MUNDIAL magazine, reminding you why you love football. But that is generally the case. That's what we wanted to do. And World Cup 2014, who doesn't remember their first World Cup? That was essentially our first, our main thing. Who doesn't remember their first World Cup? So let's celebrate the good stuff about the World Cup. Let's forget about the money and the tickets and the FIFA this, FIFA that, blatter this, blatter that, because it's not going to change anytime soon, or and it hasn't, has it? Let's be honest. On hindsight, that was 7 years ago. It's all the game still has its same old problems, doesn't it? Yeah, and it moved into that, and what was genuinely supposed to be a one-off issue, because we all had good jobs, the same sort of network that had its roots in that Stand network with the illustrators, the photographers, and that whole ethos of making it look good as well as just reading well and having interesting articles. We wanted it to look good, because I think it's just something that same group, it's the same, we like, arguably probably spend too much money on expensive jackets, expensive trainers or whatever, and that transferred into what we wanted. We don't mind paying £7 for a magazine if it looks and feels good, that that whole aesthetic. So it's gone on from there, really. And what was supposed to be a one-off issue, that we're 21 issues in now, and we're much more than a magazine. We're doing all manner of things, videos, podcasts, and all that sort of stuff. It made me realise the value of print again, I think it's fair to say, because I think football magazines had changed so much in the intervening years, and the fact, like you said, the fanzine culture had started to change. And certainly one of the main reasons we didn't want to do MUNDIAL was there wasn't really a magazine that was servicing what we saw football as. There was a lot of magazines out there or a few magazines out there that were servicing football at what they thought brands and sponsors saw the game as. And I just didn't want to read another interview with Rio Ferdinand about what boots he was wearing again without any real substance to it. And that wasn't how I absorbed football. That wasn't how, what we say about football at MUNDIAL is football is so much more than the 90 minutes. It's what happens off the pitch is equally important, whether that's trips abroad to go and see football, which then you experience other cultures and meet new people, or whether that's an expensive jacket or a pair of trainers, or you wearing a pair of, wearing a retro football shirt, a five-a-side. That doesn't, it's all the same to us. We think those things are just as important as articles about, an amazing football team, a women's football team in Glasgow, which does so much for the community, to, a non-league football team at Worthing, for example. We've covered non-league football every issue, to the bloke who sells pin badges, to, it's what we try to do with what we've done in our most recent project, Giant, the podcast. Stories about the woman who first captained Somalian women's national team was just as important to us, and has just as high production values and everything like that associated with it as it does an interview with the Leeds United captain, as it does with a story about Manchester United v Arsenal, the rivalry of the 90s and early noughties, because somewhere along the line they touch something and they have a human aspect to it, that football is the vehicle for it. But that's what hopefully we think make people want to hear about. And again, I think moving back to what football is like, how it's consumed online nowadays, with the fan TV things, which are, some of them are there for just, there are obviously good fan TV companies and people doing stuff, but a lot of it is all for, the natural progression should be those people that wanted to do a fanzine and wanted to talk about the important stuff and wanted to do, recollect great stories. They should be doing that in video format. As it is, they just sat around watching a game and shouting at a TV screen to get numbers and hits, which is a real shame.
You've teed me up really nicely here, because the bit of MUNDIAL that I'm most professionally interested in is MUNDIAL Studio. What's the thrust behind that? Would you call that a creative agency, creative studio?
Yeah, I think so. I think we have, maybe the line has been slightly blurred with shall we say, at the start, when we were like a magazine that did do things for brands and did things for yeah, whoever really. So it did, that line was always a bit blurred, because were we a magazine that did stuff, or were we an agency that did a magazine? So when you get involved in conversations, and again with various brands or whoever, you have to, you have to be fairly smart about it. And if we wanted to make this full time, we obviously had to make it pay. And at the end of the day, however much we'd like, in 2014, 2015, 2016, just doing a football magazine is not going to pay for a team of 4 or 5 people. I wish it did. And unfortunately it doesn't. So we had to, to keep the lights on, so to speak, to use a terrible phrase. We had, we started to do work and move it, not just print stuff, to doing videos, again, around the stuff outside of football, or even, around fans or around that. And brands came to us and wanted to, we like to think we can tell a good story. It's up for other people to decide that, but we've had enough feedback and we've had enough brands come to us to suggest that we can tell a certain type of story. Of course, what we always try and do with any work we do as an agency, from the agency side of things, is would we do this if Ladbrokes, Adidas, Puma, whoever, all these people, would we want to do this if they weren't paying us to do it? And the answer always has to be yes, because then you just lose your authenticity. We've turned down a number of things which may have been detrimental business-wise, it may have been detrimental long-term-wise, but we turned things down because it didn't really fit what MUNDIAL was about. There was no point us taking things on board that was going to make us the very thing that we were doing MUNDIAL as almost like a riposte to. So yeah, it's kept things going. It's allowed us to grow, of course. 5 years on, we are now, there's a group of seven of us now. Unfortunately, we had to, as any business, had to adapt and adjust during 2020. But yeah, the agency side of things is something that we always want to increase and keep going. And again, working with Spotify on Giant is probably the best example of that in more recent times. But same with, we did a great project this year, one I'm really proud of, despite all the difficulties of not being able to travel, which we never envisaged when we did the pitch, was the City Series with Adidas and Size, Adidas Originals and Size. So videos on cities, and again, it's not about the trainer. It just happens that there's a trainer called Johannesburg. But let's go to Johannesburg and talk to people about what Johannesburg means to them. And then if through that they look at the trainer and go, yeah, we'll have that. But that's very much a case for us. We like to remain authentic, and I know it's hard. And I know we've had various conversations internally, and I know some people have said, oh, you're doing a video with a gambling company or something like that. But all our work with Ladbrokes was stuff that we would have made anyway, or we wanted to make. It just so happened that there was a gambling company that were going to pay for it. And we live in a world where people are willing to pay for things, and we want to, we always try and, the football club that we set up for last year, which was unfortunately a victim of COVID and 2020. These are the things that we want to try and do and try and make a difference and change. I can tell you, if anyone is listening to this and thinking it's an easy way to make loads of money and run off into the sunset of loads of money, I can absolutely categorically tell you that's not the case. I kind of wish it was in one sense, but it's something that we want to keep improving on, and it's something that we believe we can tell stories from fans' perspective that brands can then promote and hopefully push out and push their message. But yeah, there will be, hopefully that will continue. But obviously, like anyone else in any business, not just agencies, this last year has been tough. The money's become less. We had prepared for a tournament that was going to conclude in this country. Obviously, that when that changes, then an international tournament we did if anyone went to Hotel Mundial during the World Cup in 2018, in the hottest summer of recent times, then they'll know that what we could, events as well that we can do, and how exciting we can make those and make them a bit different than just, pack loads of people in a room. And so we were obviously all set to try and do that again this summer, but unfortunately that didn't happen because of the C word. So yeah, it is something that we want to keep progressing on, and hopefully hopefully in the new year there'll be some new things that we can move forward on. But yeah, it's tough running. I'm fully aware how lucky I am to work in football and to work with my friends primarily. That's who all the people I work with at MUNDIAL, they're my best mates really. So we're incredibly lucky, but no one's been immune to how we're still a business at heart. You know, that doesn't change, and this year's been tough.
The City series is some piece of work, but you've got Giant as well, which is your Spotify Originals podcast. It's been a tremendous success. What would you say is the core idea that links the stories that are told there?
Oh, that's a good question, that. I would say, and I might have touched on it a little bit, there has to be a human aspect to it, and football just happens to be the vehicle for those things. Every episode, you know, from the first series, which was obviously 6:45 to 1 hour long episodes, to the second series, which is every week but around 20 minutes, there has to be a human element to it, I think. And whether that's Johan Cruyff's final season, that, you know, a man who was just absolutely consumed with revenge and not just revenge, but, you know, quality and just the absolute balls and the absolute talent to just go, well, I'll prove you guys wrong. And then to win the league with his team's rivals, you know, his fierce rivals. To, like I say, when I mentioned earlier on, Ikra, who captained the first women's team for Somalia, you know, she started from playing fields in London, you know, and she ended up, you know, that her journey as a human, as a person, it just so happened to be through football. So I think that's the thing that we try and tie together, and we try and I think reminding you why you love football does come into it as well. So, you know, we don't want to veer, when you're saying that, the one that's come out most recently is about Chester City's American owner Terry Smith. But we want to remind people about good times, about good things, about what football can do. I think that was the thing for the episode we did in the first series about Women's World Cup, which we did. We interviewed someone who had been involved in each of the 7 Women's World Cups before the most recent one. So, but told human stories through football, what it was like for, you know, Michelle Akers, to what it was like to Beck Smith, you know, two totally different ends of the spectrum chronologically, but yeah, both with similar stories, but also different perspectives. So those are the things that pin that together. And I think it's the thing I'm most proud of professionally in my whole life, Giant. I've been incredibly lucky to do all manner of things. Fanzines, magazines, videos. You know, I worked, luckily enough, if you've watched anything on Sky Sports with the word greatest in the title, and it's either football's greatest players, teams, managers, I worked on them, which again, incredibly lucky to do so. But I think Giant best distills for me, certainly the first 6, certainly, because I think that more time just allows you to get more involved and more in depth. That distills everything about football for me. And I think the fact that we won some New York Festival Radio Awards, alongside ESPN and the BBC, ESPN 30 for 30, we got the same award as them. That for me was the pinnacle of my professional career, or up to this point. Hopefully there's more to come. But to be judged on something and alongside something that I had absorbed just purely as a sports fan, and you know, to be compared to even being nominated alongside them was amazing. But to be judged to be the same as that was incredible. And with the work that me, T and Owen and Alex at AD at Spotify have done is something that hopefully my daughter, who's 7 at the moment, not 8, will be able to listen to in 20, 30 years time, and she'll be able to play her kids and say, your granddad did this. So yeah, that for me is so far the pinnacle. Who knows what's going to happen? Who knows? We maybe do this in 5 years time and things may have exploded and gone completely the other direction, or I might be, or maybe not. Maybe I'm doing the Hampton Richmond Borough fanzine, but who knows? We'll see.
When your daughter does listen back, she'll be able to get the inside track on Hampton and Richmond Borough too. That must mean a lot to you. Yeah, and
I mentioned it at the start, I took her to, I always believed that I would take my child to a Yeovil Town game as their first game. Of course I did. No reason why I wouldn't have for 35 years of my life. But circumstances dictated that when she wanted to go to a football game, it was a Hampton Richmond game. And I'm not for a second expecting her to necessarily take on that baton, but and keep the flag flying. I would love it if she did, obviously. But hopefully she absorbs, and as she gets older and comes to more games and as you know becomes less distracted by the amazing tuck shop and the bottles of cheap Coke that do attract her, hopefully she'll enjoy football as I enjoyed football, because that's the similarity I get at Hampton and Richmond Borough. It's very much like what it was for me when I grew up watching Yeovil Town. You could speak to the players after the game in the bar. You could have a bit of banter with the linesman, and you could have, and a bit of, and you knew the fans that you were sitting next to and sat next to, or going to the middle of, the upper end of the country. Those are the things that are still relevant and still applicable for Hampton Richmond Borough that they were for Yeovil, and hopefully she'll enjoy that, and hopefully pick up that same affection and passion for it. But equally, if she doesn't, then it means I don't have to cart her around the grounds and stuff like that. But and I can probably have my 3 pints of ale in peace. But hey, we'll see what happens on that. But it's. And again, anyone listening to this, please go to a non-league game when you can and when it's safe to do so, because it genuinely is different, and it is, hopefully, we've all seen what football's like without supporters and without fans at a higher level. It's different for them. They get supported by all manner of things, and I say this full knowledge that Hampton and Richmond Borough have received money from the National Lottery to even start this season, but a lot of clubs, we've been fortunate in that case, but obviously a lot of clubs haven't. But every single penny you spend and that money you give to someone over the turnstile is invaluable, and I've seen the other end of that and seen how much of a difference that makes.
Well, we'll leave it on that very important note. Seb, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much. And I know you've probably had loads more questions and I've waffled on and probably too much, but yeah, it's good to remind yourself why you love football. And again, I did not plan that before I did this podcast, but yeah, that's where I've come back to at the end of it. And yeah, please check out Giant on Spotify. That's the very, very last plug. Giant on Spotify, and have a listen. And if you like it, please tell your mates. Yeah, it's well worth it. And if you've enjoyed meeting Seb, there's plenty more where that came from. Don't forget to subscribe to the show if you haven't already, and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts. Humans of Non-League is a Sphinx Football production. Thanks for listening.